Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. Today, we're talking about advanced customization in Coreform Cubit using the C SDK. And our discussion today will be led by Dr. Karl Merkley. Our agenda today, we're going to do a real brief overview of Coreform. I know most of you are familiar with this. Karl will introduce the SDK, show you how to set up a C project, how to add custom menu bars, and then we'll talk about adding custom command panels. Coreform Cubit is used by engineers who need CAD import and cleanup, auto healing, semi-automated hex meshing. We have imprinting and merging capabilities, lots of fine control of your mesh properties, the mesh quality. The GUI is customizable. Python API, we're going to see the C SDK today, so you can really set Coreform Cubit up to work the way you need it to for your workflow. After this webinar, if you'd like to learn more, this is our learning resources page.
So one of the things that we talk about with Cubit is that it is scriptable and customizable. The fact that Cubit can be controlled from scripting, especially in this AI world that we're moving into, is actually really important. One of the other capabilities that Cubit grants is, we've had a previous webinar where we added some toolbars using Python. But you can also get in and get into the core of Cubit, the Cubit GUI, and modify it using the software development kit, the SDK. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to do some of that. I talked with Norbert Huber, who developed the Calculus plugin for Cubit, and Norbert's been a previous presenter here, and said, okay, Norbert, when you were first starting yours, what is something you would have needed? And he said, just a basic how to get started. So this is kind of where we're going to focus this is, you decide you want to add and expand something in Cubit. How do you get started? Okay, first of all, we need some tools. CMake is a tool that handles custom build environments across multiple platforms. So Windows, Mac, Linux. CMake is the tool that Cubit uses and many tools use to control that build environment. We need a compiler. GCC or Visual Studio, something that will support at least C++ 17. So that's going to be like Visual Studio, maybe around 2022 or greater than G++ version 13. We also need access to the Qt libraries. And Cubit is currently using Qt 6.8. I downloaded for this project the LGPL version of Qt so that you can just go ahead and use that, understand that it is under an LGPL license with the things that are required. Okay, how do we start? If you look in your install directory, there is a directory called SDK. We copy that to our local user space. Let's go look at the components directory. We'll look through and go through some of this live and see some things to do. We're going to make a modification to our CMake list.txt by adding these hints that says, where do I find Cubit? So my Cubit is installed on my Windows machine at C:program files, Coreform Cubit 25.12. And there's a CMake directory there that contains some files. And then I also add a hint saying, where is this qt6config.cmake for my qt6 install? So we run CMake, and let's look and see what we get here. So if I come back and open up my window, let's actually do this really quick. See what's in here right now. Okay, so I created, parallel to my SDK that I copied, I created a directory called build component. And that directory is currently empty. From Windows, I came and I said, okay, let's open up an x80 or an x64 command prompt. So I open that up, and from this command prompt, I'm just going to run the command CMake and I'm going to give the directory that I want to process. So if I do cmake .. component, remember this is parallel. We'd like to avoid putting code in, mixing development code, build code with our actual development code. So this is parallel. So I go up and down one, run cmake, finds all my files, and I no longer have an empty directory. Let's actually come back. I'm a Linux guy from a long time ago. I just as soon run Linux when possible. Okay, so now I have some solution files for Visual Studio. I've created some directories in here, some projects. So this is all the things that are needed. There's this cmake cache.txt that holds some settings, but that's all we need to do. So we look at those files. These are the things that were created. If you are in Linux, the default is to create make files. You can give a cmake -g option to create Ninja projects or other things. There are a number of different build environments supported by cmake. Open up Visual Studio. So here I've got all the files that were created in my solution. These are things that were mostly just copied directly as this example. Here you can see I've got my cmake list.txt open. You can see where I had added these hints. I made these modifications to the file that we just copied over. I have my source code. I've got the component that defines some things and sets things up. I've got definitions for the panels and how some panels work. I've got a toolbar manager that says, okay, how do I manage putting on new tools? So there's all the code. This is just stuff that was copied. So now if I build this, go off and build the solution from scratch, and this will take just a moment. So we're actually running the compiler and building a plugin that works in Qubit. All right, so that's built. If we look at what when we're done here again, oh, I built that as debug. So I think I now have this Qubit defined CCL. It's in Linux speak, it would be a shared library or a DLL. So I've created this inside of build Qubit, build component /debug. We're going to go ahead and go through this. I may have to rebuild that as release. Okay, let's open Qubit. And let's just go back to make sure we stay on script. Let's look at the... Okay, we looked at what was there after we're done. Notice there are additional things. I did do release in the demo, so we may need to recompile that. Now, the next step is actually in Coreform Cubit. We go to Tools, Plugins, select the add, and we select the folder containing that plugin. And just because there are sometimes on Windows issues with mixing debug and release libraries, I'm going to come back to Visual Studio and change this from debug to release and rebuild because that's relatively fast. And while I'm doing my webinar, I don't want to go too far off script. Okay, there's the rebuild. If we relook at this again, now we'll see I've got a debug and release library. Come back to Qubit here. I've got to look twice. Go to Tools, Plugins. Let's add a directory. Okay, already here, I've done this before because it knew where to come. Let's select the release directory and select that folder. So I don't need to select the actual DLL, just the folder. I close that and nothing changes. One of the things that's important to know for plugins within Qubit is we actually have to exit and restart Qubit for the plugin to be loaded. Let's go ahead and close down this extra version that I started here as well. And we come back here to Coreform and open. Close this. Now, let's get our tools, plugins. It didn't load. Well, now that's not good. What did I do wrong? Select release, select the folder. There. Close it. Because if I do add again, all it's going to do is just look for another folder. So it's not the add. I've already added it. Let's close that. And exit. Let's restart. There we go. So now if I look at my plugins again, you'll notice now I have my component listed there. Let's see, let's create a cylinder. Create cylinder radius 2Z5. All right. So I added a toolbar here that says top view is triggered. I've added some buttons here that say these buttons were triggered. I've added a new menu item. It doesn't actually do anything. It just says the dialog was triggered. So I don't have anything in most of these. But then I've also added over here a new item to the panel. And if I come here, let's do a reset. And come in here. All right, let's see if I can remember some good parameters for this. Let's say 0.3. Let's give the chord length of Okay. All right. So there's a custom panel that actually I didn't. One of my co-workers years ago added in just to throw in a definition of a wing and then put a boundary layer around that wing. So if I have something that I'm doing constantly and I want to create my own custom panel, you can do that through this method. Like I said, this shows adding a menu bar. We show adding a new toolbar buttons and new panels. One of the other things you can actually do is you can insert new commands as well. There's an example in the SDK that says, I have a command, I want to create something that I want to do. I can actually go ahead and access those things. If I add a new command in Qt, there is a method to specify that buttons are associated with hotkeys. So Qt has that ability. Now, to take an existing command and say, I want to assign a hotkey to that, I don't know, but new custom commands can certainly have hotkeys added to them. We saw that we certainly must exit and restart Qubit to get that to come back up. But now every time I come back in, these things will be loaded in. In this example, I didn't put in any new custom icons, but there are places to bring those icons in as well. Let's go through customizing the menu bar. So there is a menu manager. And within this example, this components example, one of the functions is a menu manager.cpp, and it shows how to set up a custom menu. So the first thing it checks is, hey, there's a global variable or class-wide variable. Has this already been initialized? If it's already been initialized, don't redo this. The first thing we do is we get the Claro instance. Oops. Claro is the the GUI wrapper around all of Qubit. 20 years ago, when we made this decision of how we were going to put a user interface on Qubit, we decided we want the user interface and the core code to be separate. So we added in interfaces inside of Qubit that are exposed, that we can pass commands down through, that we can query things back from Qubit. So anything that you can see or do in the Qubit GUI actually goes through an interface to get into Qubit. So we have to go get the GUI wrapper. If that GUI wrapper actually exists, we define a vector of actions, and then we actually create all of those actions. We can look at some of those, push the actions back onto a menu list, and then say, hey, GUI, add my menu within my component into Qubit. And then we set this custom initialize saying true, we've already done this, so that if we come back into this function again, it's not going to re-execute. So right here, we're calling a function in Claro to add this item into the menu. Now, this little ampersand M, that ampersand is the thing that tells Qt, hey, treat the M as a hotkey. So if I come in, let's actually see if that worked. Now I'm going off script, so I'm living dangerously here. All right, if I hit, I remember how to do this, right? Is it? There we go. Alt M executed that menu bar. So there was on a simple menu bar, there's a way to implement a hotkey script. So setting up a custom command panel is admittedly more complex. I'm not going to go into depth on how to do this, but basically, first of all, you have to define the user interface. What buttons, what panels, what inputs do you want? It can be defined in code. Once again, the AI tools are really helpful at taking, hey, I want to create a Qt widget that has these things in it, create the code. There's also a graphical designer in Qt that you can use to go ahead and lay things out exactly how you want them. Most of the panels inside of Qubit today were designed using that designer, and they were done graphically. The next thing you have to do is define the navigation nodes. The components example has a method of programmatically showing those. There is also an XML file with the components example that shows how to define these nodes using XML. But then you have to go ahead and take your XML file and install it where Qubit runs from. So that would require having root privilege on a machine where Qubit is installed. Then you have to create a factory to instantiate all the GUI elements and associate those GUI elements with the navigation nodes. That's basically the overall kind of framework. Follow through the example in the components example if that's something you want to do. Send some questions off to the forum. Norbert is on the Qubit forum and is very knowledgeable on how to do some of this. Would be very helpful. Just once again, want to just emphasize the flexibility of Qubit and the ability to do things. Norbert's calculus plugin is frankly pretty amazing. If you haven't played with that, I invite you to go look at that and some of the things that he has done there. It's fun to see, okay, here's an open source code tied directly into Qubit, and you can just run that as part of Qubit within the environment. If you have some similar complex workflows, you can encapsulate those. You can actually share them through the GUI tools. You can share customizations across organizations by installing the plugin in a global location and then users can just add those as they desire. Okay, so there's, for example, the menu manager class. So there's methods for add to existing menus, set up menu and remove menu items. And slots are Qt's method of capturing those actions. So here's some of the, okay, add to existing menu. Let's set up custom menu. All right. So here's some of the code that I cut out, for example, where we define an action, we give it some text and then we define what Qt calls an action. So when it's triggered, when it's clicked on or something's happened, we connect to this slot. That slot, something cool happened. Something cool triggered is just currently just printing something out. But so we get the command window from Claro, and then we print data to the command window. So you can put anything. If I want to put a new dialogue or anything in here, that's where I would say, hey, show my dialogue.
Best place to get questions answered, especially if you're developing your own custom toolbar or buttons or any of this customization, is to use our forum, forum.coreform.com. Post your question there. You'll be able to get it answered.